Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Rugby Breakdown. After a long layoff, we are back here chatting about the game we love, the oval-shaped ball game. And joining me again to take you through rugby, everything that is rugby is Shanaka, Amarasinghe. Shanaka, welcome back and absolutely thrilled to have you and be chatting about rugby.
Thanks, Sudarshana. Great to be here. I'd had people stopping me in the street and asking what's happening with the Papare and rugby, so great to be back.
Brilliant, and we have plenty of things to talk about, but before we go there, 2023 is a very big year for rugby globally as well, with the World Cup coming up, and also the fact that this will be the first competitive year where we will see a lot of rugby after the COVID pandemic.
Yes, we will, and I think the COVID pandemic really affected rugby fans, people who are coming out of the game at a certain age as well. And it's the first time that we're going to see tournaments not having to worry about that COVID baggage. I remember seeing Six Nations tournaments where players were standing a meter apart when they were singing the national anthem and then going and sticking their faces into each other on the pitch. So some ridiculous stuff that we saw as a result of COVID, and I'm glad that that's hopefully behind us.
Yes, we will talk about a lot of the stuff that is going to happen globally. But before that, let's look at what happened close to home. Nippon Interclub Rugby League, the first round concluded last week, and Shanaka 7 weeks of first round rugby. And then with the new structure that we have, we move on to, from this week onwards to the Super Round. Last week, of course, Navy Sports Club took on Air Force, which event virtually was a playoff game for that final spot on offer. Navy won the game 32 points to 31. Havelock Sports Club taking on Kandy. A lot of expectations on that game, but turned out to be a one-sided affair. Kandy running away with 35 points to 15. Police meeting CHNFC. Police seems to be on the up, although struggling in the opening weeks. Won that game 27 points to 22. And CRNFC, of course, almost losing to Army Sports Club in their final week, 22 points to 18. Interesting week to close off the first round. What did you take of those 4 games?
Well, I thought it's one of the most competitive club rugby seasons we have had in the recent past, Sudarshana, and that's something that's really good for the fans as well. You go into every game thinking that one team can beat the other, and that's something we saw against hot favourite CRNFC at home against Army. Army coming back within just a few points of that game as well. So it's pretty obvious that no team is invincible. Kandy have looked very much like losing, even though that they're unbeaten in the league. So it has been a really interesting week, particularly for that Air Force Navy game. I thought it was probably the most exciting game of the tournament so far. Unfortunately, a few calls going against Air Force in that last few moments where I thought their jackalers did really well to get over the ball but were not rewarded. But also they have only themselves to blame, dropping the ball on the line and conceding that match tying try to Navy. But credit to Navy for hanging in the game, 21 points adrift, coming back in and winning their place in that cup championship, deservedly so when you have to look back at it, the kind of games that they have played. Nothing in it between those two teams, but that's what knockout rugby is all about. Sia and Havelocks, I think, have done really well this last season. Havelocks very disappointing. I think their fans will be disappointed, but more than that, the players and the coach will be disappointed for their performance against Kandy last week. Everyone was expecting a blockbuster. Everyone was expecting it to go down to the 80th minute, and nothing happened. It was just too much experience from Kandy's big guys. Tarinder Ratwath scoring first, putting the conversion over as well. And more than the try, I think it was kind of the conversion that did it for Havelock, Sudarshana, because when you know that a team can convert from the right-footed kicker, from the right-handed touchline, your head drops because you know it's not your day. And when their best player is on song, and then with guys like Srinath Surya Bandara coming back, starting at fullback, injecting that kind of pace into the attack, Havelocks just had too much to do.
Yes, absolutely. Tarinder Ratwath, you spoke about him, 22 points. He basically beat Havelock Sports Club single-handedly. Kandy Sports Club have struggled because they've lost a lot of experience in the forwards. Shanaka, they have virtually a brand new pack except for Tarinder Chaturanga and Shanaka, who are veterans, and also maybe Yaqub Ali, who brings in that experience. So Kandy's transition, like you said, they look beatable. The games that they've won against CRNFC, Police Sports Club, Navy Sports Club, and even Air Force were 2 points, 3 points. They haven't scored a lot of bonus points. What should be the mojo going forward for the other teams to try and beat Kandy?
Well, I think they need to win the battle up front, Sudarshana, because if you give enough ball for these Kandy backs to run at you, they're going to kill you. And Dinal Ekanayaka has been one of the best, I think, running back in counter-attack as well. Srinath Surya Bandal, if you give him a broken field, then you know he's the best in the business still. After what 12 years in club rugby almost, he's still probably the best broken field runner that we have. And Tharinder Atwata really has everything, doesn't he? He's got the distribution, he's got the strength to break tackles, he's got the ability to kick and put you into defensive positions as well. So if you allow these guys to touch the ball too much, you're going to be in trouble. So which is where teams like Sierra FC and Havelocks have really got to take the battle to them up front and hope that these guys don't get the ball and don't turn over the ball. And that's where Kandy have been a little wanting. Guys like Tarindra Chaturanga, he's been injured recently as well. So without him in the side, Kandy a little bit vulnerable at that breakdown area, which is what other teams need to exploit. But are they good enough to do it is the question.
Yes, because you got to really think, how do you suddenly, over a season, replace the likes of Shahan Patirana, Jason Disanayaka, Boneko Udangamu, Sohiru Anthony, all of them at once. Shanaka, that's a dream pack.
Yeah, we're talking about the brain drain in other parts of society. Sudarshana, but Kandy is probably feeling it the most with a lot of those guys migrating. So it's very difficult to do because you can't buy experience. Even the other players that may have been available from other clubs are not going to bring you the same kind of experience of playing and experience of playing in Kandy. So losing those guys was a big deal for them. Also, they've suffered injuries, and they're really lucky that some of the experienced players are stepping up. Nigel Ratwata is playing well. He had a very good game against Havelocks, Tharinder Ratwata obviously, and Srinath Surya Bandara. So also Heshan Jansen has slotted in nicely to that number 9 position, speeding the game up a little bit because he knows that's what they need. So they've got a good spine in that team, and that's what's helping them. 9, 10, 12, 15. Those guys are the people who are really doing the job for them.
So Kandy, Havelocks, Sierra FC, and also Navy Sports Club will battle out for the cup segment. But plate segment is very, very interesting. Air Force Sports Club, Police, CHNFC, and Army all looking for that plate trophy, something to crow at. And Air Force will consider themselves very unlucky that they find themselves in this mix and not in the cup segment, like you mentioned. Air Force have 18 points. Police Sports Club 17, CHNFC 12 points, and Army Sports Club 12 points. Nothing between these 4 teams. Everything up for grabs. What do you expect these 4 to do in the second round?
Well, I think CHNFC will struggle a little bit because I think conditioning-wise, they're not in the place where they need to be. And Army have just been getting better and better in that regard. Against CRNFC last week, and I thought where they really took the game to CR was in their conditioning because they were able to get over the ball, especially in the later moments, in the last 15 minutes of the game. It was a really good effort that they put in. Their defense is good as a result as well, and their line-out is good. So I'm surprised that Army find themselves where they are. But I think it's going to be probably Air Force who are the front runners for this segment. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they battle against Police because that game was a fairly controversial one in the first round as well. And if Air Force cannot give away as many penalties as they are doing at the moment, then I think they will be a shoo-in for the plate title. But that's where the game is won and lost. Sometimes for the coaches, it's not in their own hands.
Yes, Police, despite starting quite slowly, are really ramping it up, isn't it? Nilufer Ibrahim just going into Police Park has gotten a very young team. He needs to try and tweak the forwards a little. Brought Dulanjana Vijay Singh back from retirement to play in the forwards. They are getting some momentum there as well.
Yes, they will get some momentum. I think they're a very underrated team. I think Johan Peiris, who plays as their fly half, unfortunately his discipline is terrible, so he's not really looking like a fly half, but he's an excellent reader of the game and he knows how to keep that Police forward back from going backwards too much. That's what they hate to do. And their line-out is good, their set piece is good. So as a result of that, they're a good team. And I think they have some good ball runners as well. And they've been together for a long time, Sudarshana. They've not had the retention problems that other teams have had. And Asanka Rodrigo also, who was there, has been there with them for a long time. So he knows the team. So it'll be an interesting battle between Air Force and Police. But if things go according to the coaching plans, I think Air Force is probably a little bit better. Of course, having said that, we don't know how serious Karthi Tamalgoda's injury was from last week.
Right, so very interesting stuff coming up in the Super Round. The 4 games that are lined up are Navy will take on Candy Sports Club, that is in Valisara, with CRNFC taking on Havelock Sports Club at London Place. In the plate segment, Air Force will host Army and CHNFC hosting Police Sports Club at Racecourse. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we will have some international rugby to talk about.
Did you submit the report? Not yet. When is the big match?
Well, the HSBC Rugby Sevens Series is in full swing. Five installments completed, and this is turning out to be one of the most competitive HSBC World Rugby Sevens Series we've ever seen. Shanaka, 5 different winners, and the final one, which was in Sydney Sevens Series, was won by New Zealand, both men's and women's championships. That must have been some consolation for the New Zealanders who are currently being affected by flash floods in the land down under. Now, New Zealand winning it 35-0. The women against France, and also the men winning it 38-0 against the Blitzboks. What were your thoughts on that, Shanaka?
Well, coming back and showing some real character, the New Zealand team, after being favourites for a long time, it's hard to fall off that mantle, Sudarshana. So I think that they've done really well to make sure that they have come back and won comfortably. And there's a lot of talent coming through the ranks in New Zealand, and there's a lot more pressure for placers, I think, which is why this team is doing as well as it is. Everything is cyclical. So New Zealand had a bit of a downer, and maybe this is the first time that we see them coming up back again. And being an Olympic sport, it really changes the hype around the game, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Like Shanaka mentioned, the top 4 teams from men's and the women's section after the conclusion of the 7 series will win automatic qualification for the Olympic Games next year, 2024, in Paris. So a lot at stake for all the teams. Currently, New Zealand women lead the points table with 12 points of drift from Australia, who are in second, and New Zealand men lead the points table in the men's section, 9 points adrift from South Africa. Now, looking at this 7 series, Shanaka, a name that we are normally used to, we are very much used to when it comes to New Zealand rugby, is Spencer. And Peyton Spencer made his debut for the New Zealanders. New Zealanders do have a very funny way of introducing young talent into the Sevens outfit, and a couple of years later, you'll see them at Super Rugby, and a couple of years later, if he's really, really good, he will try and get that black jersey. Does that mean New Zealand Sevens Rugby is pretty much the second level to New Zealand 15s Rugby?
Well, it has been for a long time, Sudarshan. Even guys like Jonah Lomu, Christian Cullen, Jeff Wilson, Glenn Osborne, all of these guys came through the Sevens ranks. So that's where they test a player's mettle. That's where they test how much gas they have as well in terms of being able to last a 15s game. People may not realize it if they haven't played both codes, but it's much harder to play 15 minutes of Sevens rugby than it is to play 80 minutes of union rugby. So that's where they test whether these guys have got it and whether they've got the skills and that kind of thing. So it is the first breeding ground for potential All Blacks, and then of course coming through to Super Rugby, that's where the players get their money from. And then after that, of course, if they're good enough, then they'll get to the All Blacks. So this is the first step in Peyton Spencer's illustrious career. He won't be the first second-generation All Black by a long shot because New Zealand is a small country. But if he comes through and takes his father's jersey, I think that will be stuff of fairy tales.
Oh, absolutely. Shanaka spoke about Super Rugby giving them some money, but talking about rugby and money, interestingly, even New Zealand is struggling to hold on to their talent because some of their best talents are opting to find greener pastures. Wichimonga, he's leaving New Zealand rugby soon after the Rugby World Cup. Shanaka, not great news for New Zealand.
Not great news at all for me. Of course, probably the best fly half since Daniel Carter. that we have seen not just here but in World Rugby. But unfortunately, he hasn't been given the kind of chances that he would have expected to in this All Black jersey. And when I say that, it doesn't mean in terms of starting, but he's still playing very much under the shadow of Beauden Barrett. And if you're a young fly half, you're a young player at the top of your game, you don't want to be playing second fiddle to someone. These guys are all sports people, and they all have egos at some level. So I don't think he wants to be on a team where he's not bossing the game. And he's not bossing the All Blacks. And I think if he was bossing the All Blacks, they'd be playing much better. But unfortunately, he's playing this kind of dual playmaker role, which doesn't really fit nicely for him. So he's decided, you know what, I'm at the top of my game. I'm going to go abroad and make some money for my family. And you absolutely can't blame players for doing it.
Well, that is what it is. What we'll do is we have some very, very interesting rugby coming up in the coming weeks in the Six Nations. We'll talk about that after a short break.
Did you submit the report? Not yet. When is the big match?
Well, like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, very interesting year for World Rugby because the Rugby World Cup is coming up and the Six Nations is going to really dictate terms on how this World Cup is going to be played. Six Nations will commence this weekend with 3 games lined up, and it will go on for 5 exciting rounds. And this weekend we will have 3 games that will really decide on how the Six Nations will commence as well. Wales taking on Ireland in the opener Shanaka, followed by the Kolkata Cup, England taking on Scotland, and final game of the weekend, Italy taking on France in Rome. Now let's talk about the first game, Wales taking on Ireland. Interesting one because Wales have gotten their coach back, and Ireland, on the other hand, in my opinion, one of the 2 front runners to become Six Nations champions. How do you rate that game?
Well, I think what a lot of people don't know and what a lot of people haven't really comprehended is that Ireland are number 1 in the world right now. And if you watch Leinster playing from a couple of weeks ago, this Ireland side is looking really good. They're running the ball well, and I think they have some of the best players in their positions in the world. Guys like Dan Sheehan, Andrew Porter, Tag Furlong, Tag Byrne, Gary Ringrose, all these guys are just so good at an international level that I'm not sure how they can be beaten, to be honest. And I think Wales will suffer in this game because unless Warren Gatland has brought some of his old magic back, to be fair to him, Wales are probably the most successful team in the last 15 years of Six Nations rugby. So as a result of that, maybe they have a little bit of confidence going into the competition, but I don't see Wales beating Ireland, Sudarshana, and I think that's going to be a bit of a thumping as well.
Absolutely. The only thing that Welsh will be hoping for is the fact that they are playing at home, and that might spice up things a little. Andy Farrell, the man in charge of the Irish, a Farrell we can all appreciate, unlike his son who's fallen into trouble for not being able to tackle properly. Now, Andy has done wonders with Irish rugby. Johnny Sexton, the experienced campaigner, as their spearhead and the skipper. But you spoke about a lot of the names, and most of them are Lions as well, British and Irish Lions. How do you think this preparation will affect Ireland's performance come the World Cup?
Well, I think there's one thing that Andy Farrell has done right, and he's played the same kind of rugby over the last 2 years. They've just gotten better at it, and I think they will keep trying to continue to get better at it. We had Eddie Jones, who was playing this real cloak and dagger game where I'm not going to show the rest of the world how we're going to play in the World Cup, and that was his undoing as well. So now everybody knows what to expect from Ireland, but as far as decision making goes, I think they're top. I think Gibson Park has brought a lot of speed to their game. Johnny Sexton has a wonderful kicking game. And they've got Gary Ringrose, who I think is probably the best I've seen since Conrad Smith. He's really an outstanding player in how he thinks and reads the game. And he's very unselfish as well. So I think we can expect a lot of great things from this Irish team if they can stay injury-free.
Yes, and the next game, so Shanaka's picked, and a lot of betting men will bet with Ireland in this opening game because they are currently the #1 team in World Rugby. Next up, England taking on Scotland. Always a tricky one because when it comes to the Calcutta Cup, in the last 5 attempts, Scotland have actually beaten England in in three of those. Majority, and even last year, Scotland absolutely delivered an upset against England. How will this one come down to it? Because England are going into this game with a brand new coach, sacking Eddie Jones in a World Cup year. Was that the right decision, Shanaka?
Well, it can go one of two ways, Sudarshan, and it won't go anywhere in the middle. England will be absolutely brilliant, or England will be rubbish. So that's what we can expect on the day, because a new coach generally sometimes brings about a little bit of a peak in performance. Otherwise, he can bring down a really a bad performance because the team have lost their kind of confidence in the way that they were playing. They're wondering whether they'll be selected. That kind of stuff really plays a part when you've got a new coach in play. But England have won only 5 of their last 12 matches, and that's something that they will be wanting to overturn, especially at Twickenham. And the RFU, when they made that inexplicable decision to get rid of Eddie Jones, what they did say was that they wanted the Twickenham crowd to be proud of what they were seeing. So it's, of course, it's a lot of old style kind of, that whole establishment thinking from England, where we play a certain way because we are England kind of thing. So they're not looking forward to the World Cup, which Eddie Jones was. They're looking forward to making sure that the punters who come to Twickenham are happy. So I don't know whether that's a short-term decision that will come back to bite them. We don't know. But Scotland are good, and Scotland have been good for a long time. And I thought they were very unlucky not to beat the All Blacks last autumn. And I think that they have what it takes to beat England. It's just which England team turns up on the day. Are they going to be rid of that Eddie Jones baggage, or are they going to spiral deeper into it? Is Steve Borthwick going to be able to inspire a performance against the old enemy? And I think it's going to be a very emotional game. And I can't really pick one, because if I was picking on form, I would have to pick Scotland, because I think they have been really good recently. Some of their players are underrated players. And as long as Stuart Hogg passes the ball, I think they'll win.
Now, talking about England, Shanaka, how Marcus Smith will be used is going to be pivotal to how this game will turn out to be. With Owen Farrell, is he going to play in that number 10 jersey, or will he wear the number 12 or 13 jersey? Because Smith, if you give him the same freedom that he gets at the Queens, he's going to be your playmaker. And when he plays with freedom, he's a very dynamic player.
Well, he's suffering the same problem that we spoke of with Richie Mo'unga, Sudarshana, because he's been put in the playmaker's role. He's been put in that pivotal number 10 jersey, and he's always playing in the shadow of Owen Farrell outside him. He's never sure whether he's going to start during the World Cup. He doesn't know whether he's got to play his game or whether he's got to play the system. You saw that Owen Farrell was very angry with him maybe after one of the last autumn internationals. I think it was against Argentina, where he said that things didn't go according to plan. So you can see that there's obviously a bit of friction there. I don't think they work as a combination at 10 and 12. I think they're both very good players in their own right. But as a 10-12 combination, they don't work. And that's me putting my neck out of the line and saying it's not going to work either. So either they fix that problem, dropping one of them, or they just have this halfway house where they're just going to be getting the quarterfinals and maybe lose there.
Doesn't help the fact that your competitor is your skipper as well, isn't it? Unlike in the case of Mo'unga and Barrett. Now, moving on to the final game of the week, probably the game that is more easier to call. Italy taking on France, another one of the favorites for the Six Nations, and also maybe the World Cup as well, with the World Cup being happening in France. But something about Italy is the fact that they had a tremendous autumn series. They beat Australia, they beat South Africa. So this Italy team is on the up, but France definitely the favorites.
France definitely the favorites, but again with France, you can never say which team is going to turn up. That's been their culture for a long time. And they may go to Rome and think, oh, you know what, we've got an easy game, we've got another World Cup coming up, we've got one eye on the World Cup, players trying not to get injured, and that's when the magic happens for teams like Italy. So I think it might be a close game, but I don't think that France will allow themselves to lose this game.
Yes, with the likes of Dupont and Intermac getting in the mix, it's quite difficult, isn't it, to try and get one over. But Shanaka, it's going to be an early prediction, I know, but we haven't even gone into 1 week or one round of the game. But I'm going to ask you, to do a difficult one and try and predict who will win the Six Nations?
Well, I think France are going to Dublin. So as a result of them travelling away from home, I think at the Allianz Stadium, Ireland might be favourites going in there. So that's going to probably be the decider unless England do something spectacular in this tournament, which I don't see them doing. So I'm going to have to say Ireland is going to win this Six Nations Championship. I think Fabien Galthié is probably going to experiment a little bit. They're missing Jonathan Dante as well, France. So I think there will be a few hiccups where France will find their way. I think Ireland are still looking the best oiled machine. I'm not saying that's going to continue on to the World Cup, but at the moment, Ireland are probably peaking.
Well, very interesting prediction there, because remember the final round, the final game of the Six Nations will be Ireland taking on England on St. Patrick's Day. And if Ireland are going to win the Six Nations on St. Patrick's Day, that is going to be some party in Dublin. With that, we come to the close of the Rugby Breakdown. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, Shanaka.
Likewise, Sudarshana.
Looking forward to meeting you next week. And as for you, thank you very much for joining us on Sri Lanka's #1 sports hub, www.thepapare.com. Do make sure that you comment and let us know what you want us to chat more come next week. And until next time, I'm Sudarshana Peiris signing off for thepapare.com.